of APAICS, the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies. Thank you for joining us today for APAICS in Conversation. We are delighted to have two wonderful guests with us today. Alice Sum is a shareholder at Fowler White Burnett. She represents businesses and individuals in complex commercial litigation disputes before state and federal courts and in alternate dispute resolution forums. Alice serves on the judicial nominating committees of the Florida 17th Circuit and the Florida Bar. She is also the founding member and past president of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of South Florida. Judge Raag Singhal sits on the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. He is the first Asian American in history to serve as an Article III judge in the jurisdiction of the 11th Circuit, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Prior to his confirmation, he was a state circuit court judge in Broward County, Florida for 8 years. Earlier in his career, he was an assistant state attorney and a criminal defense attorney in private practice. Judge Singhal is an active and frequent speaker at events for various groups, such as the Asian Pacific American Bar Association. He received his law degree from Wake Forest University School of Law, and most importantly, he is a graduate of Rice University. Please remember to put any of your questions in the comment section if you're joining us via Facebook, and in the chat box if you're here on the webinar itself. So please welcome our guest today.
Thank you, Madeline, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. We are excited to be joined by the Honorable Raag Singhal. I'm honored to be part of this conversation with Judge Singhal. I met him through the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of South Florida, which is an affiliate of NAPABA. He has been an active role model and impactful mentor to many lawyers in NAPABA, including myself and the greater South Florida legal community throughout his career. So with that, let's kick off this with a question about your journey to where you are today, Judge. So for those who are unfamiliar with your story, would you please tell us about your career path to the bench?
Sure, and first I want to thank Madeline, Vincent, and Anthony for putting this together and for allowing me to participate. For any of you who are joining an APAICS conversation for the first time, I think that you'll see that there are really quite a few excellent speakers that are lined up each week, and I think it's a very worthwhile organization to participate in. And Alice, I'm so grateful that you would agree to do the interview. I've told several people that the interview could be the other way around, because one of the things that we haven't said is that you are one of two Asian American members of the Florida Bar Board of Governors, and I'm very proud of you for that. My career path is interesting. I graduated from law school in 1989, and I went to work at a reasonably large size Fort Lauderdale firm, about 35 lawyers at that time, which back then was a decent size. And it was the firm that I had clerked for my 2L summer. I went there, and I had been there only a little less than a year, and my mom unfortunately passed away. And at that point in time, I really began to rethink what my career path was going to be like. And so I left the firm to become a prosecutor at the state attorney's office in Broward. I stayed there about 3.5 years, and then I opened up my own criminal defense firm. And that's what I ran for 18 years until Governor Scott appointed me in 2011. I was in that role for about 8 years, and then was nominated by President Trump in August of 2019 and confirmed December 2019. So a lot of different things in there over my 31 years.
Well, if we could go back a little bit in time, I know with your practice as a criminal defense attorney, at some point you decided that you were interested in becoming a member of the bench. And I think that one of the things that I'm most inspired about you, not just about in terms of intelligence and your skill set, is the perseverance component of how you got to where you are today. And I'd be remiss if I didn't note that you went through a process that took approximately 6 years to ascend to the circuit court bench, the state court bench. And this was through multiple applications, if I recall correctly, about 15 and 3 governors. I know today perhaps you wear that as a badge of honor on your sleeve, but would you care to talk a little bit more about that time period, how you felt as you were going through the process? And frankly, given that it took a little bit of time and some perseverance, did you ever think about quitting or maybe, putting it aside and going down a different path?
Sure. It was a very difficult process, and certainly there were many times along the way where I wished that things would have happened on my timetable as opposed to God's timetable or the governor's timetable or whoever was looking out at that point in time. There were a number of factors that really came into play, and I ultimately was appointed on I believe it's my 17th application. The funny thing about me is when you add all of the judicial nominating commissions that I've gone through for various posts, I'm often asked to give advice on how to navigate the process. And it's funny when you're someone who didn't get the position you were trying to get so many times that you would still be asked for advice. But I think that, along the way, you realize at the time I started applying, there were no circuit judges of Asian American descent. There had never been one in the state of Florida. 2 years before I got appointed, Judge Minu Sasser was appointed in Palm Beach County. And once that happened, that might have been the only time where I thought, okay, maybe I can stop applying, because in a sense, I had accomplished my goal through her being appointed. But at the same time, I was getting out of committee and my name was going to the governor, and I didn't want to give up. I've got 3 children. I didn't want them to see me give up. I didn't want my wife to see me give up. And I've always been someone who, maybe to a fault, has kept going and kept trying until I was told not to. And here I wasn't being told not to. I was always getting very close, but not quite there. I think that truly part of our culture is to persevere. And I think that is something that really goes back to the work ethic that my parents taught me and that many of our parents taught us. And so it was important for me, if I were to stop, to have a very good reason to stop. I really didn't have a very good reason to stop.
Well, you took the bench in January of this year. And that feels like about a lifetime ago.
It's been a very strange and long 2020, that's for sure.
Yes. And then approximately 60 or so days later, COVID occurred, and I think everyone had to pivot as a result of that. What were your experiences in pivoting as someone who had just joined the federal bench, and what advice or thoughts would you care to share with our viewers today about continuing to navigate the interesting times that we're in?
It's very interesting in that after 8 years on the state circuit court bench, I felt pretty comfortable with any kind of case that would come in front of me at that level. I didn't really feel that there was a whole lot left that I needed to learn, although each case was different and some cases had nuances. I felt pretty comfortable at least knowing the basic things that I had to do. And then I came into this position, and oftentimes you have a judicial college and something like that helps you initially navigate. And interestingly, because of COVID and resets, my judicial college isn't going to be until the second week of December. So it's really going to be one where I've already had a year on the bench. I'm really fortunate, though, that I have 3 very knowledgeable law clerks. They've helped me a tremendous amount. My career clerk has been in this courthouse for more than a decade, previously clerking for another judge, and just invaluable people. And then I have a courtroom deputy who in the federal system is a combination of a deputy and a clerk and just does all sorts of things to help you run your docket. And she's just been phenomenal. She was with Judge Khan, who is the judge that I had the privilege of taking over for once he took senior status. I have a lot to learn, and I'm working hard trying to learn, reading as much as I can, but also relying on people that are knowledgeable to help.
And I would like to ask you, what tips do you have for folks across the spectrum of experience that are interested in getting more involved in public service, maybe pivoting in their career, or even if they're starting off as law students or they're relatively young attorneys, about pursuing a career in public service?
I think the best advice that I can give on that, keeping in mind that I got this federal position at age 56, and many others have gotten it at a younger age, is that we, in general, tend to be in a rush sometimes to get somewhere and get there fast. I became a federal judge really at the best point in my career. I had developed a lot of skills and expertise through all the things that I learned in my time as a lawyer. And I think that if it's something that an individual wants, if they truly want to do public service, and if they apply for a couple jobs or a job and they don't get it, they absolutely shouldn't give up. It's a difficult thought process to have accomplished so much and to have really a solid resume, and then to feel, hey, I'm not getting where I want to get. But the competition is pretty fierce. And a lot of times we learn from disappointments, and we learn from failures. And sometimes I don't like calling it failure, but I was disappointed each of the times that I didn't get appointed to the state circuit bench. But in all candor, had I got appointed the first time I applied, I don't feel I would have been nearly as qualified or nearly as good of a judge in a number of ways as I was when I finally did get appointed.
Well, as we heard in your introduction by Madeline, you're the first APIA an Indian American to serve as an Article III federal judge in the 11th Circuit, and that includes Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. What importance do you think there is to that fact, and what do you view as the importance of having individuals who look and have backgrounds like others in the community being appointed to the bench?
I think it's very important that we have qualified applicants that are also diverse in different ways. I think the qualifications is always what has to govern first, and then secondary quality of being diverse really adds a benefit. I know that, for example, when you come into my courtroom, I immediately smile just seeing you there. I think that other Asian Americans that come into my courtroom, at least at the state level, were happy that I was sitting there. And so, we always have to remember that there's a level of empathy that those who have shared our experiences will naturally have. It's to be compared with sympathy. It doesn't mean that a judge can have sympathy for someone, but certainly empathy, having gone through a lot of the same struggles. And I know that sometimes people don't realize what it's like growing up in an Asian American household. And there are certainly many peculiarities to that. And we as a culture are a very hardworking, dedicated culture, and really rely on education and things to make our points. And so when I was growing up, and again, keeping in mind my age, science and medicine was really the field that most Asian Americans pursued, whether it be engineering or as a medical doctor. And now it's just so nice for me to see an organization like APAICS or NAPABA or APABA or SABA or any of these organizations that really have groups of Asian American lawyers and where we can help each other.
And on that note, what ideas or suggestions do you have for people like me and my colleagues in APAICS, South Florida, and NAPABA, when we say we want to do more to help others, to the extent that you're talking about perhaps ascending to the judiciary, or if there's political office, or any other type of leadership position, what can we do to help each other?
Well, I think a lot of it is that we have to determine what area we like best as individually, and what area we feel we can serve the people best. And then beyond that, I think that we have to realize that we do have groups that can help. One of the great things that you've done, Alice, is you have become, through the nomination process, a member of the Judicial Nominating Commission. And it's, for those who don't know, here in Florida, it's a small committee, 9 people, that reviews all applicants and decides who will ultimately get to the governor for consideration. And it's those kind of things that really are helpful for people in our culture. And I know that you wouldn't sit there and promote somebody or nominate someone just because they're Asian American, but it makes a big difference in an interview to come before 9 people and see someone who is dedicated, hardworking, and friendly like you are. It can affect someone's interview and make the entire interview a better one. So I think that we all have to strive to do a little bit extra. And in doing so, if we can lay the groundwork for our children and our children's children, that's really, in my mind, the goal.
Well, thank you. And what in saying nice things about me, what you didn't mention is how big of a role you placed. Frankly, I had my own self-doubt about whether I was qualified, worthy, do I even have a chance? And you were instrumental in really encouraging me and giving me the belief that well, as they say, what is it? Gosh darn it, I can do this. So I think in your role, it's an important one that spans your entire career, that you've encouraged so many others. And I think that frankly, without your support, I feel like maybe I wouldn't have made it as far as I have. So you deserve quite a bit of kudos for that.
I appreciate it very much, but I have no doubt about you. And if one day they put you on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal, just please be nice to me, because I'll still be sitting right here. So,
if only, Judge. Well, so while we've been chatting, we've been seeing some questions rolling in. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to share a couple that I see here on the screen. So from one viewer, they asked, what were some of the barriers you faced in your ascension to become a federal judge?
I will say that, kind of going back to the state court process, I had some pretty interesting barriers that really emanated from the fact that I was a fairly high-level criminal defense lawyer for so long. And so, we're in an adversarial system, and being a criminal defense lawyer, you sometimes have those who will oppose you in the appointment process. Then moving forward to the federal nomination process, it's pretty interesting at the district court level. You have to have the support of both senators from your state. And I didn't have the support of both senators until the 2018 election. And then I did have the support of both senators. So what you can't do, though, is, even if it's something that hurts you or is disturbing to you, you have to handle that on your own at home with your family, because it's every senator's absolute right to vote and make the decision that they think is best in their mind. And I've always tried to get where I am on my record and on the kind of things that I've done as a lawyer. And so those disappointments, what I tried to do, and thank God, with the support of my wife and my children, I was able to use that to help do even better. And so it's my commitment to all of you that are watching, certainly, that I will continue to strive to be the best that I can be, because I do think that that will help any of you out there that want to potentially be a judge. And I will tell you, I didn't know from the beginning. I didn't know, like when I went to law school, that I wanted to be a judge. It's not one of those kind of things. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, but I think there was a point in time where I recognized that there weren't any people at all in Florida that looked like us on the bench. And so I wanted to try. And there were a couple times where I actually thought as well that, if I could get Jay Kim, for example, to be a judge, or if I could get Katie Fang to be a judge, then I wouldn't have to try. But really, I think the ultimate goal was just to get at least one or two of us appointed. And I think now across the state of Florida, we have 8. And it's very exciting to me.
Oh, I was actually on a conference call today for a Florida bar meeting, and one of the attorneys in the governor's general counsel's office mentioned the statistics of, comparing the number of APAs as members of the Florida bar versus that are serving on the bench, and the statistics are really favorable in terms of like the last year of the number on the bench far outstrip the membership of the Florida bar.
Good.
So, and in general, diversity is increasing on the Florida state courts as well.
Yes.
So we have another question from one of our viewers. Let's see, Mark Mara, someone from
Yes.
our local practice, asks, thank you for your participation. And the question is, for young attorneys trying to take the first step to getting involved in their community, what would you recommend?
So I think that in Broward County and Miami-Dade County, which is where we're based, there are so many voluntary bar associations. There are some that have few members and some that have a lot of members. For those that practice in Broward, the Broward County Bar Association is just a tremendous organization. The executive director, Braulio Rosa, he really is very inclusive. And so within that, he'll do crossover events with APABA and with SABA. And so for Asian Americans in particular, I think that that's a way to get involved in several bar organizations at once. Now, Mark's not Asian American, but I would give him the same advice. Broward County Bar Association, really work toward maybe a board of directors role there. I also think that some of the other organizations like the Inns of Court are really valuable organizations because they deal with the practice of law, but promoting civility, professionalism, and the rule of law. And I think that for many of the younger lawyers in Florida, at least, they don't realize that the civility oath that's part of the oath that they took to be a member of the Florida Bar went into place in 2011. So when I was sworn in 1989, there was no civility oath, but the bar recognized that professionalism and civility were waning. And so now that's part of the actual oath of admission. And I'm very proud of lawyers like Mark, who work very hard, his wife Jessica, who work very hard to be professional and combine everything, whether it's as a family person, as a lawyer, and as a participant in many of our bar organizations.
So we've talked a little bit about the beginnings, the middle, and we're nowhere close to the end of your career. But I'm curious, do you have any regrets or things that you wish maybe you had done differently, or, oh gosh, had I known X, at that time, maybe I would have done something differently?
Well, it's a very interesting question because we don't know where we would have ended up had we done something differently or had we removed certain things from our background. And certainly I handled some pretty controversial cases as a criminal defense lawyer. And I think we all saw along the way that some of those controversial cases are what kept me possibly from becoming a judge sooner. On the other hand, had I not done those controversial cases, had I not earned the reputation in doing those cases, maybe I never would have been even considered as a judge. So it's really very difficult to say. In the end, being that I've been able to get to the state court bench and the federal bench, I can't say I would have done anything differently. Had I not made it here, I might look at you and say, you know what, I shouldn't have done criminal defense. I should have been a personal injury lawyer and made a lot of money and made my family happier. But I think that really, when we push toward a goal and when we're professional in doing so, we get there. And I'm very grateful to have this opportunity.
It's interesting that you specifically mentioned your background in criminal defense work, because it seems that, and I can only speak generally to the backgrounds of the federal judges in the state of Florida, there aren't as many that have a criminal defense background like you do. You were also an assistant state attorney, so you were a prosecutor, but there seems to be more that were federal prosecutors, state attorneys, et cetera, before ascending to either the state or the federal bench. Do you have any either advice or suggestions for individuals who are at the front and the end of their career about concerns? Well, if I do this, that this might make it more difficult, as you know, maybe, it had an impact.
Well, I think that unfortunately, sometimes people, even in positions of power, don't necessarily understand what lawyers and judges really do. And lawyers have clients, and lawyers have to represent their clients ethically, but to the best of their ability. Now, the good news is the last two federal judges in Florida that have been confirmed are both former longtime criminal defense lawyers. So there's me, and then in the Middle District of Florida, Judge John Badalamenti was just confirmed about 10 days ago. He was an assistant federal public defender, and such a good one that he actually won a case at the United States Supreme Court, got a 5-4 decision on a criminal defense case in his favor. So I think really the best way that I can put it is, no matter what you choose to do it to the best of your ability. If you're good enough that you can win a case as a criminal defense lawyer at the U.S. Supreme Court level, great things are going to happen, and great things have happened to John. With regard to me, I've always been just the firmest believer in our Constitution, and criminal defense lawyers are fighting to make sure that those rights that are in the Constitution are properly preserved. And so I really think that my role as a criminal defense lawyer and ensuring that each of my clients was treated fairly and were able to exercise the rights that they wanted makes me a better person to be a judge. I really don't want to discourage people from doing that, because it was just a wonderful job. It taught me many things about many different types of people. It allowed me to stand in the shoes of people far less fortunate than I've been. And I really learned so much from that job that I couldn't have in other ways.
Would you care to comment on the role of any, what we'll call outside activity? I know that you were very involved, and you continue to be very involved with local bar organizations, and the impact of that work that you did on your ascension to the state court bench and eventually to the federal court bench.
I think outside activities, such as what you're describing, are critical. I think that judges in general sometimes are viewed as people who make the law and can change the law, and that's not really what judges are all about. I mean, the folks that are elected by the will of the people, the Congress, are the ones that make the law. They're the ones that say what the law should be, and judges aren't there to say what the law should be. And so we need to be involved in organizations for a variety of reasons, to educate ourselves but also to educate the public. And it is concerning to me that in recent times, there have been people who say that judges shouldn't be members of certain organizations. But really, when you think about it, if you want a judge to be well-rounded, if you want a judge to have diverse views, you want that judge to be members of organizations, whether it's the American Bar Association or the Federalist Society. You want that judge to be able to go to church or temple. But ultimately, the one thing that the judge must be wed to is preserving the Constitution.
Well, we're getting close to wrapping up our conversation, so I have one final question for you, Judge. What do you believe it means to be a resilient leader?
I think that question is a good question, because it's certainly one that's going to be answered differently by different people based on their experience. To me, a resilient leader is one that can lead whether things are going well or whether they're not going well. And I think it ties into the perseverance part too. So if, for example, I'm trying to get somewhere and it's not working out well, internally I might take it badly, but I still have to fight the good fight in the proper way when I'm out in the community. And so there might have been times where I was really down that I didn't get appointed, but I still had clients to represent, and I still had people to encourage. So let's say, for example, that I was applying to be a judge and another Asian American was applying. So the two of us were applying for the same position. Certainly a resilient leader not only tries to get the position himself, but encourages that other person. And so my best example of that is Minu Sasser. And unfortunately, Minu passed away about a year ago, but she too was hoping to get a United States District Court judicial position. The two of us were in it together. The two of us tried to encourage each other, because really, it would have been great if we both got it. Never would we have been in a position where we would torpedo one another, as they say. So a resilient leader is someone who tries to accomplish as much as possible, but also tries to ensure that those that may rely on him or her accomplish as much as possible as well.
Well, thank you very much, Judge, for participating in this conversation and answering questions and sharing your words of wisdom. That this is, even though it's within the APAICS conversation context, this is what you do for us every day in the South Florida legal community. So I'm glad that other folks across the country have had the opportunity to listen to your words of wisdom. Back to you, Madeline.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you so much, Judge and Alice, for participating with us today. We greatly appreciate all the insight that you shared. Next week on Thursday, June 25th, come join us for our next APAICS in Conversation at 12:30 p.m. Eastern with the Honorable Paul Igasaki, former chair and chief judge of the U.S. Department of Labor Administrative Review Board, as well as the former acting chair and vice chair of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, otherwise known as the EEOC. So please sign up and RSVP with us. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you the next time. Take care.
Thank you so much.